What's up, Wonders of London fans? It's me, Vincent from Wonders of London, and welcome to our Primrose Hill and Regent's Park tour. I'm doing it a little bit backwards. I'm starting at the end of the tour, or close to the end of the tour, because as you can see, it's a very lovely day. So I wanted to end the tour with a lovely view from Primrose Hill. Usually Primrose Hill is at the beginning because we start at Chalk Farm Station, but today we're starting by Baker Street Station next to the Globe Pub. And if you've ever thought Baker Street Station is a difficult place to navigate, because as you can see, crossing from the Globe Pub to Baker Street Station looks quite daunting, then think again, because you do have the wonderful Wonderpass right here that will take you under the road. Of course, unfortunately, the Wonderpass is not step free, so it's not good for people with mobility issues. However, if you do ever have the opportunity, I highly recommend checking out the wonderful Wonderpass. You've got so many wondrous things that you can explore and discover here in the gorgeous Wonderpass, and it takes you to the other side, which is quite brilliant. You've got the Wonderpass timeline over here. It was actually opened in 2015. However, in 1968, as you can see, the first heart transplant in the UK took place in Marylebone. You also have the Beatles store on Baker Street, and it's all clothing and accessories, and offered demo recordings in the store studio, and even it had its own on-site astrologer. We've got, of course, the great Madame Tussauds over here. Madame Tussaud actually started making death masks of the French royal family and the aristocracy, the bourgeoisie, after the French Revolution. We've got Florence Nightingale history at number 1 Harley Street over there. And in 1887, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle published a study in Scarlet, the first novel to feature the infamous Baker Street detective Sherlock Holmes. Of course, here we got the magnifying glass, Hound of the Baskervilles, love it. Any fans of Sherlock Holmes? Of course, have Regency history with the Prince Regent. Later John Nash, he would hire, later George IV, sorry, he would hire John Nash to build a processional route from his London residence, Carlton House, to the Regent's Park via Regent Street. You've got the Royal Academy of Music, Britain's oldest conservatoire, and of course in the Regent's Park, where we are going momentarily, you have the Regent's Park Open Air Theatre, which is quite brilliant. As we continue this way, you've got a little bit of Henry VIII history. Henry VIII acquired the hunting ground in the area that would later become Regent's Park. You've got the Domesday Book mentioning the Marylebone area in 1086. And of course, Baker Street is the world's first underground railway station. How cool is that? And as you continue this way, you will come out at Baker Street. But let's head over to the Regent's Park and see what we can see. As you make your way to the park, be sure to look at Chiltern Court and look out for these plaques, because they will tell you that the author H.G. Wells lived and worked here. Another famous author, Arnold Bennett, lived and worked and died here as well. And a wonderful, amazing bit of modern history, 20th century history, can also be found right here at Chiltern Court, because as you can see in this building, the SOE's Norwegian section, the Special Operations Executive Norwegian section, planned the telemark raid to disrupt development of Nazi atomic weapons. It's a very important building, especially with World War II history. And of course, if you are a fan of the Beatles, we've got the London Beatles store right here, close to the entrance of Baker Street. So Beatles fans, this is for you. Sgt. Pepper, Lonely Hearts Club Band. And in fact, right next to it, you have the historic 221B Baker Street, which is kind of fictional as well, but it is quite interesting. But this is where, if Sherlock Holmes was a real person, Sherlock Holmes would have lived. And you can get tickets to visit the wonderful Sherlock Holmes Museum before or after exploring the brilliant Regent's Park. But now let's go to Regent's Park. And finally we've arrived in the Regent's Park. We are just over here, close to Baker Street, but we're going to be walking through the Regent's Park, past Queen Mary, through Queen Mary's Gardens, past the sports pitches, the London Zoo, and we're going to end right here at the viewing platform of Primrose Hill. But here is the beautiful Regent's Park with some of spring's blossoms. Spring is a gorgeous season, but my favourite season is, of course, autumn. What is everyone's favourite season? Let us know in the comments. Spring is quite beautiful with all of these colours coming through, getting ready for summer. Now, as we saw in the underpass, the Wonderpass rather, the origins of Regent's Park date back to the time of Henry VIII. But in fact, the Marylebone area dates back to 1086 with the Domesday Book. But Henry VIII bought the land that used to be here and turned it into a hunting ground. And it was a hunting ground for a very long time. However, eventually, the Prince Regents, who would later become George IV, would hire the architect John Nash to work on this very, very beautiful park, creating the wonderful things that we see. And I'll tell you a bit more about the great John Nash later on. But here we can see some of the trees and wildlife that can be found in the amazing Regent's Park. It's totaling over 395 acres, so there's a lot to discover. We have white letter hair streak on elm, tawny owls, grey herons, kestrels, noctule bats, ring-necked parakeets, mandarin ducks, great crested grebes, and marsh marigold. As well as amazing trees, we also have a lot of beautiful waterfowl, like the geese over there and the swans whose necks are about to pop out, hopefully. There are the swans feeding, but there's so much beauty to be discovered here. And of course, as it is spring, the daffodils, the Welsh flower of course, are all over the place and looking very, very beautiful. And here's a view of one of the lakes in the park from over one of the bridges in the park. Now, the lake used to freeze over in the 1800s and people would actually come here to go ice skating. And in fact, the River Thames as well, which runs through London, used to freeze over and people would go ice skating on the River Thames. They actually once walked an elephant over the River Thames. However, quite sadly, the ice here at the Regent's Park Lake wasn't as strong as the one that could be found on the River Thames. And one winter, the ice was thin and an accident occurred where a couple of people died and a few people were severely injured when the ice broke and they fell into the water. Now, Regent's Park is a very, very big park. In fact, it is so big, it has its own university inside. This is how big this wonderful park is. People don't often realize how big the park is because often it feels like you've left the park, so you just make your way to the station. But in fact, it is a very, very big park with an entire zoo as well as a university. And here you've got one of the entrances to the university, which does have very beautiful grounds and beautiful extended grounds, because its extended grounds are actually the Regent's Park. There we can see some of the buildings of the university within the Regent's Park. Very fancy university, by the way. Now, as we walk through this part of the Regent's Park, it's very difficult to forget that you are in the city. You are in London. You can see the BT Tower in the distance there. However, there are parts of the Regent's Park, which is why it's such an amazing park. It's not my favourite park though, but it is right up there. And it's such an amazing park because there are bits of the park where you will forget that you are in a big, busy, chaotic city known as London. Another amazing thing about the park is that there is a tennis centre in the Regent's Park, which is quite a fantastic tennis centre. The Regent's Park Will to Win Tennis Centre is open to the public and has 12 public tennis courts and 2 paddle courts, floodlights, changing rooms, showers, adult and junior coaching, as well as several other amenities. So very good tennis centre. Now, one of the parts of Regent's Park that will make you feel like you've left the centre or the city is right here. The Queen Mary's Rose Gardens. And they have some gorgeous gates. What a lovely way to enter the Queen Mary's Rose Gardens. Now, because of these gates and of course the main road running through the Regent's Park, it feels like I'm outside the park, but I'm not in fact outside the park. I'm still very well within the park, but a lot of people will come from the lake where I've come, and when they get to the tennis court over there, they'll think, oh, the park is over. It was beautiful, but it's very small. But it is much bigger. We've got so many beautiful little gardens. And the rose gardens here are said to have more than 12,000 roses. Now, I've not counted the roses myself, so if you ever do come and count the roses, please don't call me and say, Vincent, there are 11,999 roses, but there are supposed to be 12,000 roses. It is not yet rose season, so we won't be able to see roses today, but it is blossom season. It is blossom season rather, as you can see over here. Apologies for the slight shaky bit over there, but the blossoms, particularly the cherry blossoms, are in season. So we got the lovely bees visiting as well. I do love good cherry blossom, and we're going to see some wonderful blossoms today. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there are not that many roses to be seen today in the Regent's Park, but they will be coming very, very soon. There is, however, a lot of beauty to be discovered in the park, and look at these wonderful reflections on this lake and bridge right over there. Beautiful day to explore the park. And of course you can enter this little island in the middle of the Queen Mary's Gardens and have a walk around nature. It feels as though I've left the city, guys. Just walking through here. And if you come on a really calm day, unfortunately it's not as calm as I'd like, you get a wonderful photo opportunity of this sculpture and its reflection in the water there. And if you're really patient, you can wait for the geese or swans to fly away. It makes for a great photo opportunity. But another brilliant little bit is the view of this wonderful, wonderful waterfall. Look at that. And from here, we get to see the wonderful waterfall from a bit closer with a lovely bird there. Oh, there's actually three in fact in the water, but how gorgeous is this, guys? And of course we got to see it earlier from that rock island over there. Simply beautiful. And if you come up over here close to the bridge we were standing on a few moments ago, you can actually walk up to the top and see what the waterfall looks like from the top. But it's not a lovely little maze just walking through here, and you can just hear the water and the birds. You've lost the big city sounds, the motors, the machines, the gears winding and grinding, echoing through the tumultuous city, and you are just here in a peaceful area with wonderful and beautiful views like this and this. Such beautiful gardens in the Regent's Park. We are of course still in the Queen Mary's Rose Gardens. And of course, unfortunately, we are still in the city, so you can every now and then hear aeroplanes, even though it feels like you're not in the city. However, the beauty of this wonderful park is so much that you can ignore the aeroplanes and just get lost in the Regal and Regency period and their vision of nature, with the brainchild of Prince George that was visualized by the great architect John Nash. It's so beautiful. I don't know why the water is blue at the moment. They're probably treating it or something, but it looks quite nice. Looks like it's a reflection of the skies. And I mean, as I mentioned earlier, it is blossom season, so there are lots of blossoms to be seen in the wonderful walkways, avenues and boulevards of the beautiful Queen Mary's Gardens in the Regent's Park. And of course, my favourite friends are around, the bees, which is pretty cool. Let's see if we can find any bees. This particularly beautiful tree. Ooh, there's a lovely bumblebee. Oh, it's coming. Oh no, it's gone. I love bees. I do apologise. Ooh, there we go. Save the bees, guys. They're amazing. Very beautiful. Now, speaking of the bees, there is one thing I'm always trying to recommend people do not do when they're in the parks. Now, I love doing it myself, but I'm always saying please do it only in parks where we are allowed to do what I'm about to tell you about, because it has far-reaching consequences, not just for the flowers, but for the birds, the squirrels, the animals that are here in the park, but not just them. For us, because it does affect the bees, and it's believed that Albert Einstein said, if the bees ever disappear from the face of the earth, mankind will only have 4 years to live. And one thing we can do to help protect nature is not feeding the animals. There we can see some of the reasons why we should not feed the animals. But if we continue this way, what we actually get when we feed the animals incorrect food. I love feeding the animals, the birds and the squirrels in the parks. I love feeding them food, but what we get when we feed them the incorrect food, human food, is that human food has extra nutrients. So when they go to the toilet, those extra nutrients pass on, they leach into the earth. So what you actually get is when the birds go to the toilet in the water, that affects the pH balance of the water, making it too acidic or too alkaline, which is not very good for the birds or the fish that reside in the water. So it's quite a terrible thing. But also, when they go to the toilet on the earth, like where we are now in the Queen Mary's Rose Gardens, those extra nutrients leach into the earth, and they actually make it poisonous for the flowers and the plants. So what that eventually means is that the flowers, the roses, of which there are 12,000 at least right here in the Queen Mary's Rose Gardens, cannot grow anymore. And in fact, this is why dogs are not allowed, except for guide dogs, in the Queen Mary's Rose Gardens, because they do affect the delicate self-sustaining ecosystem there is here in the parks. And when the flowers die, we do in fact lose the bees. And if it is believed that Albert Einstein said, and if his saying is right, if the bees disappear from the face of the earth, mankind will have only 4 years to live. it will definitely affect us as well. And right now I'm showing you these reed beds. They're quite fascinating because in 2012 they decided to restore them because they'd been lost in the 1980s, and the lake needed help because you had a decline in the overall quality of the water, and there's microscopic animals like zooplankton that help maintain the water's alkaline and acidity were actually dying. And this caused the reed beds, which also helped to filter the water, to actually die, and it affected the negative water quality. And part of the reason the water quality was affected was because people were feeding the birds and animals incorrectly. And that's why as you walk around the Regent's Park, you have a lot of these signs saying, please don't feed the wildlife. If we do want to maintain the beauty, we must, whenever possible, if we're not allowed to feed animals in certain parks, follow those particular rules. Now, if you come here when it's rose seasons, I've got something just for you guys. They're not ready yet, they're just loading, but they are especially for you. Another sad thing about feeding the birds is that it attracts rats. And you get large groups of birds that then eat the seeds so the flowers can't grow. And what the rats actually do is they eat the baby birds as well, which is very, very sad. Now come back in a few weeks and this place will be full of roses, guys. So you still have time to come to the Queen Mary's Gardens and the Regent's Park to explore the beautiful roses that we cannot see now, but we will be seeing in a few weeks. Now, as I mentioned earlier, not many people realize how big the park actually is. And in fact, if you follow me this way, we can see these lovely colors. But if you follow me further this way, you can see that we are actually just over here in the Queen Mary's Rose Gardens. We started only over there, so we haven't even gone that far in the park. And one of the reasons people think that the park is so small is because you have so many of these beautiful gates, but it makes it feel like you have left the park. For example, if I come this way, as you can see, it looks like I've left the park because I'm on a main road. You've got the BT Tower in the distance once again, so it feels like we've left the park, but we haven't. We are still on park grounds. And right here by the Regent's Park allotments, we actually have a scarecrow over there. Cool. And next to the allotment, we have the Capel Manor College. So not only do we have a university, we also have an environmental college right here in Regent's Park. Another thing that makes it seem like you've left the park is that you get to see these signs that are pointing out the underground. But you have so much more to explore, like the English and Avenue Gardens. But when you're on the main road, you kind of get this feeling that you've explored the entire park, but we have not, as I will show you momentarily. Here we are in the beautiful English and Avenue Gardens in the Regent's Park. Very gorgeous, and we are now right here. But here are the English and Avenue Gardens. I love walking through here, but once again, like in the Queen Mary's Rose Gardens, no dogs except guide dogs, because when the dogs go to the toilet on the flowers, those extra nutrients, which I mentioned earlier, do unfortunately damage the earth and the flowers. And you've got a few bulbs planted here, so they're always recurring, so it is a shame. But here's some of the fantastic flowers in the Avenue Gardens and the English Gardens. And I just love the avenues, an apt name. Look at the beautiful fountains, but also look at the beautiful avenues as you walk through the gorgeous English and Avenue Gardens. It's a very photogenic place, Instagrammable. Is that word allowed here on YouTube? I don't know. But remember guys, we've got a walking tour that comes right through here. You can book our walking tours, private tours or otherwise. And of course, do give us a like on the video if you're enjoying the beautiful views, And if you want to see more of this amazing place that is known as London, give us a like, give us a follow, subscribe, and check us out on Facebook. We're also on TikTok and Instagram, and we do lives on other platforms as well. We're hoping to be able to do lives right here very, very soon. These are the beautiful avenue gardens in the Regent's Park. And look at the beautiful floral arrangements that we have over here. Amazing beds. I'm always telling people when they come to the tour, when I do videos and lives in the Regent's Park, that you must visit whatever park you have. If you're in London, try, if you are able, to visit the London parks or English parks at least once a season, or wherever you are, in your own country, in your own city, in your own town, in your own village. Try to visit the parks at least once a season, because they're always changing due to the season. So you get different plants, different flowers in the different seasons. And here in the Regent's Park, we got to see the wonderful blossoms, as we're going to see once again in a few moments. But not only do we have blossoms, when the blossoms go away in a few weeks, the roses are going to start coming out for spring and summer. And when those go away, we're going to have more autumn sort of leaves, autumn colours. And then winter is going to come and bring what winter brings. And one of my favourite bits in the Avenue and English Gardens is over here. You can't see it quite properly now because the blossoms haven't come out yet. But this is a great place to come and take photos. Just look at that. You can stand under the blossoms that are here usually, and you get a fantastic photo opportunity. But as you can see in the distance, we have some actual blossoms, so we're going to go and check those out momentarily. And right here, as we approach the last fountain in this particular avenue, there are technically 3 avenues, we have these beautiful blossoms. How gorgeous are those? Then you can come round to the central avenue, second avenue as I like to call it. You have this wonderful photo opportunity. As you can see, there are quite a few people. I often recommend coming early in the morning if you want to take amazing photos with very few people in the avenues or the entire park in and of itself. But this is very, very gorgeous. And here is the 3rd avenue. And as you can see over here, it's kind of bare. The earth is bare. That's because, as I mentioned, they're always changing the flowers. So they're getting ready to put in the spring bulbs and spring flowers in there. So when we come back in a couple of weeks, it will be completely different. And this is why I'm always saying, if you have the opportunity, you must visit the parks at least once a season. Because while the layout is always the same, the flowers are never always the same. And you get to see something different every time you visit. And this is one of the beautiful things about nature, and one of the beautiful things about this amazing park. And guys, can you see this beauty? Did you know you don't have to pay anything to come into the Regent's Park? It is entirely free to visit. Sometimes you do need to get tickets when they have certain events like concerts and stuff, but otherwise, to enjoy this wonderful beauty, you need not pay anything. And just have a look at that. So peaceful. Great place to come and relax and meditate and just be at one with nature again. Now, a lot of the trees that we'll see in this part of the park, the Avenue Gardens, and on the boardwalk are actually very, very young. And the reason they're very, very young is because there was a period where they were not growing well and they'd actually caught a disease. And there have been a few diseases that have plagued the London trees. One of the most famous diseases was the Dutch elm disease of the 1960s, which killed millions of elm trees in the 1960s. And this disease actually changed the face of London, which is a very interesting thing. But we had another disease soon after these trees, which are very young now. The original trees were planted. And they had to get rid of those trees. Allegedly, it was more than 400 trees that they got rid of. And of course, another architect was hired to complete to replant and redesign the park. However, that architect designed it in the spirit, or redesigned it rather, in the spirit of John Nash, the original architect. Now, the architect John Nash is the individual we have to give thanks for this park, the Regent's Park, that we're walking through. As we walk along here on the Broadwalk, and in fact these are some of the trees that are newer, that had to be gotten rid of. But John Nash was perhaps the favoured architect of the Prince Regent, who would later become George IV. And the Prince Regent and John Nash worked on so many projects together. To give an example of what I mean, they worked on Buckingham Palace together. They actually expanded or extended what was known at the time as Buckingham House and turned it into Buckingham Palace. And of course, they worked on the Regent Street as well as the Regent's Canal, part of it, not entirely, but they did have some influence over the Regent's Canal. But they also worked on St James's Park, and if you've ever been to Brighton, the Brighton Pavilion was their brainchild as well. And in fact, right here in the Regent's Park, the grand idea was to build what may then have been known as the Regent's Palace. The Prince Regent wanted a grand palatial summer residence here in the Regent's Palace, and had he been successful, we probably would not have been visiting Buckingham Palace as we do so many times, because this may have become the actual residence of the monarch in London, the official HQ. So it is quite a fascinating thing. But George IV was not very good with money. To give an example of what I mean, he used to host banquets, and sometimes these banquets would have at least 60 courses, sometimes 100. It has been said he had one banquet where there were either 60 or 100 courses. Some historians say it was 60, some say it was 100. I like to go with 100 because it is a more outstanding number. But just imagine that, 100 courses. I can't even name 5 courses. I know starter, main, aperitif, dessert, no idea what comes after that. I don't even know if they come in that order. But of course, as you might imagine, they were running out of ideas as to what to eat. And like in Indiana Jones, it is said that at this banquet, they had raw monkey brains. Now, as you might imagine, someone who hosts 100-course or 60-course banquets is not going to be very good with money. The Prince Regent was constantly broke. If you want to see a comedic take on how broke the Prince Regent was, look up Black Adder starring Rowan Atkinson, aka Mr. Bean, and Hugh Laurie as the Prince Regent. And Hugh Laurie is more famously known as Dr. House. It also has the great comedian Stephen Fry in there. But it is quite a brilliant TV show, and it gives us an image, albeit jokingly, of how broke the Prince Regent was. And because of all of these sort of great contributions to architecture and art, but also his not very good spending, he actually ran out of money. The Regent's street where you go shopping was actually supposed to be a grand procession route leading from his house to the palace here that was supposed to be here in the Regent's Park. But of course the palace was never finished, because with so many projects and so many parties, the prince, later George IV, ran out of money. And in fact, John Nash was fired before he could finish Buckingham Palace and the Marble Arch, which they worked on together as well. So it is quite an interesting thing. They spent too much money, more money than they were allowed by government to spend. And as such, we never got what would have been an amazing palace here in the Regent's Park, and what may have been known as the Regent's Palace. But it is still so beautiful to be walking through the Regent's Park. Now, as we walk along the Broad Walk, so named because it is so broad, we have this lovely fountain. This was actually a present from Sir Khawazji Jahangir, a wealthy gentleman of Bombay, Mumbai, as a token of gratitude to the people of England for the protection enjoyed by him and his fellow countrymen under the British rule in India. Of course, we all know how that ended. Not going to get into that today, but we do still have this magnificent bit of that period of history. So long ago, yet so close. Now, as you continue this way, so we've come from that direction, but we're going to be turning this way, you get where the zoo begins. Because you don't only have a university in the park, you don't only have several gardens, you don't only have a college, you also have, in the Regent's Park, the biggest set of outdoor sports facilities in the country, including here, where you get football, rugby, cricket, and the pagoda in the centre. But you also have a running track, which we're going to walk past later on. But not only that, you have an entire zoo, the ZSL, the London Zoo, where they filmed Harry Potter scenes. It is where Harry goes to the zoo and learns he can speak Parseltongue. And it is the zoo right here in the Regent's Park. So this gives you an idea of how grand and big this wonderful park actually is. This bit of the zoo here is the children's section. So you've got the children's section of the zoo right here. But one of my favourite parts of the park is right next to the children's zoo, because if you're lucky, you'll see two things. If you're not so lucky, you'll probably see one of two things. But one thing you will see are camels, because you have two camels in the zoo. And from outside, you can actually see a couple of the camels there. We get to see the camels a bit better from this angle. And if I zoom in, there are two camels right there in the ZSL London Zoo. How cool is that? But if you're really lucky, we are not so lucky today. You can see that's the tiger enclosure. Can you see that sort of tree platform over there? If you're really lucky and you come here, where you've got the sports facilities in the Regent's Park, sometimes if you're really lucky, you get to see the tiger sunning himself. Unfortunately, we're not so lucky today. Now, once again, it's going to feel like we're leaving the park, but we are not, in fact, leaving the park because of the main road over there. We're currently over here, right by the zoo. You've got the main entrance just down there. But as you can see, we've still got Primrose Hill, which is part of the park as well. But because you exit here and you see the cars, it feels like, oh, the park is over. It is not. In fact, if you're lucky and you come to the right part at the right time of day, you can see zebras over there. How cool is that? And if you're really lucky, we're not so lucky today, you do get to see giraffes. Can you guys make out a little bit of the giraffe? While the giraffes didn't want to play today, we have a few more zebras here, so that's pretty cool. And don't worry, we got something special at the very end. As I mentioned earlier, you do have a running track in the park as well, as part of the sports facilities. And of course, it kind of feels like we're outside the park, but we are not. We are still in the Regent's Park. Another thing you get to enjoy as you walk through the park are these beautiful canal views. This, of course, is the Regent's Canal, which is part of the Grand Union Canal that goes all the way up to the Midlands in Birmingham, connects to Liverpool, Manchester, etc. As you can see, it truly does feel like we're outside the park, but no, we are not. We're actually now right here, entering Primrose Hill. We're going to be going to the top of the hill to get a wonderful view, but the first thing I'd like to show you is this lovely little cottage. Wouldn't you just love to live here? So beautiful. Now this is the hill that we have to climb all the way up over there. Just taking a moment to rest as I go up the hill. Here's a lovely daffodil. And we're still progressing up the hill. But let's take a break here to see a little bit of the view. How brilliant is that, guys? We got the BT Tower on one end. In the middle, the Shard, tallest building in Western Europe. We've got St Paul's Cathedral, looking quite small in compared to the other skyscrapers there. Did you know St Paul's was once the tallest building in London? Then we've got the walkie-talkie and the other city buildings. Let's go to the hill now and see the view properly. And we're almost there, guys. Look at that view. London from Primrose Hill. And here's a little plaque showing you some of the things you can see, like Canary Wharf, St Mark's Church, the Gherkin, the Shard, St Paul's Cathedral, the BT Tower, London Eye, and the Houses of Parliament. But here they are in earnest. How fantastic is this view, guys? It is a majestic view of cranes, because they're always building. Now this is an amazing view, but for me it's not my favorite, especially because you have the cranes everywhere. My favorite view is the Alexandra. Oh wow, got parrots. Where have they come from? Anyway, my favorite view is Alexandra Palace, the Ali Pali view, followed by Greenwich. Greenwich offers a somewhat bigger view of London, but this is still majestic, is it not? We've got the London Eye in the distance, and the Shard, the pregnant building, St Paul's Cathedral, and the walkie-talkie. And when you look at it, it looks like the walkie-talkie is really far away from the pregnant building, but they're actually very close. It's because the river bends, and the way we're looking at it from here makes it seem like they're far apart from each other, but it is quite a majestic view. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Remember, guys, give us a follow, a like, subscribe, and do check us out on the other socials: Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. I have been Vincent from Wonders of London. I will leave you here right by Primrose Hill, where the great William Blake once conversed with the spiritual sun and saw him on Primrose Hill. Do have a lovely rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, etc., wherever you are. Bye.